Today's topic here on Foodable Weekly, vertical farming. You don't want to miss this. Welcome to another episode of On Foodable Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Barron, and today we are going to be talking about vertical farming. It's a little different than what the typical concept is, where we know it in the restaurant and hospitality space. That's really more on the farm-to-table approach, which is traditional farms, everything from urban farming to these micro farms that are supplying most of our chefs and our high independent restaurants out there with most of their farm-to-table goods. However, the difference is vertical farms actually take and produce larger quantities. There's a completely different approach to it. It's a little bit more commercial, but it may be the future of farming in general. So we're going to take a deep dive on this topic today on the show. So let's welcome our guest, Dr. Dickson. And Dr., I don't want to chop up your last name. Is it Despommier? How do you pronounce that?
Despommier.
Despommier. All right. So a great French name there. I love that. Today we're talking a little bit about the kind of the future era of farming. You've ventured into an area called vertical farming for quite some time. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing in the space.
For the last 10 years, I've sort of been advocating for this. We actually put our data that we had collected through the internet, mostly, on a website, and we expected, of course, the public to trash it. And actually, the exact opposite happened. We had all these iterations that were sent in to us on our website from architects and designers and people who knew how to use AutoCAD. And you can see some of those still on Google Images. If you just type out the term vertical farm, you'll see that a lot of them are in practical application, but they do stimulate you to think about how this might look. So the next thing that happened was that real examples began to show up. Starting in around 2011. And today, that idea that indeed started in a classroom about now over 16 years ago has resulted in about 1,000 examples of vertical farms found throughout the world.
You had an interesting stat that in our research that really alarmed me, and that is kind of the future of food in general to the growing population of the earth. Was that if we had all of the surface farming allocated, that to feed the current, I think, number of billions of people that we have inhabiting the planet, it's about the size of South America. Is that accurate?
Actually, it turns out to be larger than that because the latest Landsat satellite number 8 in the Landsat series, launched by NASA last year, revealed for the first time all the infrastructure for the entire Earth's vegetation types. And I called up the group that manages that data set at the University let's see, I guess it was at Boston University. That's right, Boston University. And the leader of that group told me that the estimate of size of South America is grossly underestimated because it doesn't include grazing land. So if you throw in grazing land into the equation, I guess they're under the impression that we use everything.
Wow.
That's for 7 billion people, and of course we've got another 3 billion coming along in the next 10 to 15 or 20 years. Where will their food come from, even if we could supply everybody today with enough food, which we can do, but I guess it's maldistributed. That's probably the biggest problem today, but in the future it won't be a maldistribution of food, it will just be an absence of the production of food, I'm afraid.
So do you feel like this vertical farm approach is going to be really kind of the next phase of maybe what farm to table is today?
We have to sort of compare outdoor farming with indoor farming technologies. And in the outdoor farming technologies, although they're robust in many cases and largely driven by agrochemicals such as herbicides and pesticides and fertilizers, and mechanical devices such as tractors and harvesters and planters and weeders, etc. If you add up the ecological footprint that the outdoor farmer has, even though the farmer doesn't want that footprint, he is or she is forced into it by the technology that they're stuck with. An indoor farm doesn't need all of that accoutrement, so to speak. I think John Deere would go out of business if they had to support the indoor farming industry because there's no plowing.
Right.
It's all done by hydroponics and aeroponics. And in fact, it's done without the use of soil. So for me, the biggest advantage of doing this indoors, besides the fact that it puts food at your doorstep, is that we don't have to farm outdoors anymore if we don't want to.
Right.
And by not farming outdoors, we could actually help to restore a lot of the damaged ecosystems that we've sacrificed for farming over the last, let's say, 2,000 or 3,000 years.
Right.
We could put the carbon budget of the Earth back into sync with where it should be rather than where it is now.
So a couple of questions. I think that's a good transition, but a couple of questions for you in regards to kind of the future. So if vertical farming were to really get accelerated and take off, my questions would be, first of all, what type of farmers are going to be actually, building these vertical farms, harvesting from them, and so on? That really shifts. Does it become much more scientific?
The dirt farmer's lifespan in the world is limited by the conditions under which they have to farm, and a lot of farming is done in temperate zones. So it's a single season that you get to farm, and indoor farming doesn't have a season. So I think you start to examine it closer, a lot of outdoor farmers would be attracted to these possibilities if they knew they existed.
Curious though, flavor of the products, the produce, vegetables, and so on that would be coming out of a vertical farm in these kinds of environment, would they be as hardy, or would we see a different type of vegetable crop than what we're seeing today from traditional farms of today?
Do they taste good? Are they good for you?
Right.
Are they genetically modified? These are all hot button issues that people like to push because they have agendas, obviously. And the answer to all of those questions is that the plants that grow indoors are the same plants that grow outdoors. So if you think they're modified outdoors, then yes, you take the same plant indoors and that's the same plant, but you don't have to do anything special to the plant to get it to grow inside. I'm not worried about the nutritional value of what you can grow indoors or the kinds of things that you can grow indoors. It's up to us to decide what to do with it.
Newark has just broken ground with a 70,000 square foot vertical farm. Do you feel like, and it seems to be a fairly expensive and somewhat impressive undertaking, do you feel like the costs to be able to get down to that point are going to get more manageable to where we could see more micro farms developing in communities across the U.S. and abroad?
Sure. The scalability of indoor farming is a big issue that's being addressed in many places. And I have a good friend up at MIT in the Media Lab. His name is Caleb Harper. You may want to call him up and converse with him a little bit as to what he's doing. He's got a group up there that's interested in monitoring plant growth, and in specific edible plant growth. And they've developed chambers for this type of experiment, and those chambers could easily be brought out to a setting like a grocery store or an apartment complex, or they could be stacked on top of each other, and
right.
You could turn them into your own version of a vertical farm. So the size of these structures are largely dictated right now by whether or not it's an abandoned apartment house or an abandoned warehouse.
Right.
Specifically warehouses. So the ones that I'm thinking about, there is one in Chicago, for instance, or just outside Chicago, called Farmed Here, and they took over an old abandoned plastics factory and they retrofitted it with grow systems, and they're extremely profitable right now. They're breaking out all over the place, and they're about to franchise. So I think when you see something like that happen, you can't help but get enthusiastic about the future of this industry.
Definitely. Well, Doctor, we want to thank you so much for stopping in on an episode today talking about this very interesting topic, because I think it does affect the restaurant hospitality industry, especially over the coming years as we continue to see farm to table grow in this segment. But thanks for stopping in today. We really appreciate it.
Terrific. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, guys, so thank you so much for watching again on another great episode here on Foodable Weekly. As you know, we constantly are looking for very interesting topics, whether it's in the field with our features, our side dishes, If you have ideas, make sure and tweet us, which is just @Foodable, or my call sign, which is @Paul Barron. You can do that. Again, we have some great shows coming up, lots of new content, new chef vignettes, which are kind of our unique spin-offs of Table 42. Also, if you're looking to start a restaurant, we've got Rock My Restaurant and the Crazy Boys there coming back to actually some very interesting things. We've got a version of Rock My Restaurant now that's called Rock My Restaurant Pro. You've got to check that out. So just visit, of course, the website, foodabletv.com. Make sure and check us on the next episode of On Foodable Weekly.